So I read the book Let There Be Gaslight by Brady Goodwin Jr. It's by a former Christian. I believe he said he was a Christian for about 30 years. And he lost his faith. Or better yet, he removed his faith from placing it in the Bible and Christianity. He still expresses faith. But I thought I'd just give my impressions of the book and just share my thoughts and ideas about the book. It's 360 pages, so it definitely sends a lot of information to you. But I will say that the majority of the text is about things that he's had a lot of experience with. So he would reference biblical scholars that were a part of his academic programs in Bible college and in seminary. And he would present their views on different passages in the Hebrew Bible and certain words in the Hebrew text. And he would get into different translations. So he would also provide strengths and weaknesses for particular views between either liberal scholars and conservative scholars. So that does take a large portion of the text. But I will say that Let There Be Gaslight reveals a credulity about popular natural scientists' claims. He doesn't give the same scrutiny to certain natural scientists and their claims as he does conservative biblical scholars. I think this is really revealed when he talks about the cosmological argument. What he says about what natural science does and what natural science has demonstrated doesn't match up with what actual natural scientists say natural science does and what natural science has demonstrated. Like I said, he does express faith. It's just not in the Bible and it's not in Christianity. I would say he places faith now in scientism. And it seems like the lack of scientific and or mathematical maturity played a major role in his faith crisis. So here's what I mean by that. Not only had I never been properly educated on the theory of evolution from actual evolutionists, rather, mainly from fundamentalist Christians who had an obvious bias in the matter, but also I did not have a proper understanding of what a scientific theory was or how a hypothesis went on to earn that distinguished title. But I was not alone, nor was I the first Christian to have turned a deaf ear to science. According to a recent study, 36% of college students don't significantly improve in critical thinking during their 4-year tenure. These students had trouble distinguishing fact from opinion and cause from correlation. At first glance, it might seem to suggest that a third of college graduates are lazy or ignorant, or that higher education is a waste. But if you look closer, Golding told her bright-eyed audience, you'll find a different message. Turns out, this third of students isn't taking any science. Mathematics is in fact ideally suited to prepare the mind for higher forms of thought, because on the one hand it pertains to the world of visible things, and on the other hand it deals with abstract concepts. This is what I think the crux of the matter is, the lack of scientific and or mathematical maturity. There's an error in the line of reasoning that's being carried throughout Let There Be Gaslight. The lack of scientific maturity is what led to his crisis in faith. Genesis chapter 1 does not affirm false information about how the natural world operates. Theologians generally are delighted with the proof that the universe had a beginning, but astronomers are curiously upset. Their reactions provide an interesting demonstration of the response of the scientific mind, supposedly a very objective mind. When evidence uncovered by science itself leads to a conflict with the articles of faith in our profession. It turns out that the scientist behaves the way the rest of us do when our beliefs are in conflict with the evidence. We become irritated, we pretend the conflict does not exist, or we paper it over with meaningless phrases. I suppose that the idea of a beginning in time annoyed Einstein because of its theological implications. A good number of the most eminent scientists of the age refused even to countenance the idea of a beginning to space-time, or a birth of the universe. The problem lay in the fact that it bore a terrible resemblance to the biblical Genesis and to the creation theory advanced by many religions. Reasonable people should follow where the evidence leads. Not liking the evidence is irrelevant. Jastrow continues, now we see how the astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world, the word the Bible used to describe the universe. The details differ, but the essential elements in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis are the same. The chain of events leading to man commenced suddenly and sharply at a definite moment in time, in a flash of light and energy. Over 40 years later, a particle physicist, Guido Tonelli, commented, in short, there was light, just as the Bible has it, except that it did not happen suddenly, and it was by no means easily achieved. At the end of the fourth day, 380 years have elapsed. As for the photons, released finally from the ties that imprison them, free from that seemingly inextricable embrace, they can at last travel anywhere freely. The universe becomes transparent, allowing light to cross it from side to side. This does not prove that Genesis chapter 1 is true. What it shows is that physicists recognize that Genesis chapter 1 is not in conflict with 20th century cosmology. The details differ between Genesis chapter 1 and general relativity theory and quantum theory because they're talking about different things, but not conflicting things. Natural science, philosophy, and religion are not opposites. It's not an either or, but a both and. The rules of logic that govern philosophy, religion, art. Natural science is governed by the exact same rules of reason. To predict nature, and thereby not to be at its mercy. To understand nature, and so to enjoy it. These are among the main motivations for the examination of nature through science. Whereas the poetic understanding of nature is primarily the self-realization, the proclamation, and the ennoblement of one's own spirit. But these are in a sense complementary, not contradictory motivations, illuminating the two sides of humans. Both coexist to some degree within each individual. Art, beauty, philosophy, religion, science, in a word, culture, are on one level our magic tent, and we have needed it desperately since time immemorial. In all probability, they were born at the same time. There are different modalities in which symbolic thought is articulated. The question is, does Genesis chapter 1 mean the events happened over a short period of time or a long period of time? That's why it was important for Brady to have handled the entire chapter as opposed to just focusing on certain words like create or firmament. Jastrow and Tonelli seem to agree that Genesis chapter 1 conveys a short period of time. But does it really? It's not the passage of time that's in view in Genesis chapter 1, but the functionality of time. John Walton comments,
then the third day, he doesn't manufacture any objects. He just says, let the dry land emerge. It's already there. Let the dry land emerge. And let these plants sprout. Let them drop seed and sprout. That's an order, function kind of system. And he sets that up to work in an ordered realm. And so on the third day, that's why we can have food. The first 3 days, then, God created significant functions for human existence: time, weather, food. Now, I submit that if you go to any culture in any time period, pick your place, pick your time, pick your people group, okay, they all understand very well the issues of time, weather, and food. Not so much quarks and supernova, but time, weather, and food they've got down pat.
Ultimately, the meaning of a word comes from the context in which it is used. Again, John Walton.
Now, at that point, you should say, well, okay, notice that we've now starting to see some differences. You might say, well, when I think about origins, when I think about creation, I tend to think about God making material objects in a material cosmos. Good for you. That's our world. No surprises there. But is that what an Israelite would think? Is that what a Babylonian or a Canaanite would think? What is the ancient world view about all of this? After all, it's not important what origins questions we want to ask or what origins account we would give. We're trying to read them, read their text. And so we finally asked the question that, boy, it would have been nice if we had asked it all along. What kind of origins account is this? Yes! That's the question. And instead of thinking that we're going to start reading Genesis knowing what kind of origins account it is, now we've been put enough off balance that we can ask, okay, you tell me, biblical author, what kind of origins account is this? Let me wipe my slate clean as much as I can of my modern assumptions and start reading the text.
How did the ancients communicate? Stephanie Dalley is a scholar of ancient Middle Eastern cultures. She can also read cuneiform, the writing system of ancient Mesopotamian civilizations that includes the Babylonians. She has a research interest in the Hanging Gardens of Babylon and is the author of the book, The Mystery of the Hanging Garden of Babylon. She was reading a Babylonian artifact in the British Museum that detailed the deeds of King Sennacherib. While she was reading the inscription, she recognized the cuneiform word for a date palm tree. The thing that stuck out to her was that instead of the date palm tree being used as a noun, it was used as a verb. So basically it was saying like Sennacherib date palmed water. So she started researching date palming, and she decided to visit the location where Sennacherib's garden would have been, which is modern day northern Iraq. So she goes to northern Iraq, and when she sees the date palm tree, she immediately understands why the word was used the way it was used.
General pattern around the trunk of the tree resembles the shape of a screw. The kind of screw used for drawing water uphill. Silent and able to keep a constant amount of water flowing against gravity, it would have been an engineering breakthrough. Sennacherib was using the shape of a date palm to describe an Archimedes screw.
When you invent something, you've got to find words for it. Like on your computer, you have this mouse. Well, you know, that could be quite perplexing in the future for people who talk about mice on desks. Here, we've got something that maybe they've already invented, and they know what it looks like, but how are they going to find a word for it? They look in nature for something that has it too, and this is what provides them with a word that they can use for it, that everybody will understand.
Given the connection between temple and rest in the ancient Near East, it becomes natural to see the biblical creation of the cosmos as being configured in temple building, inauguration, and dedication terms. As Levinson puts it, the 7-day creation account, culminating in the divine rest, should be understood as somehow parallel to the building of temples for divine rest. This course of analogy and logic results in the understanding that Genesis 1 is framed in terms of the creation of a cosmic temple in which Yahweh takes up his repose. The 7 days are comparable to 7-day temple dedications, at the end of which deity takes up his rest in the temple. On the basis of all of this, Genesis 1 can be viewed as using the metaphor of temple inauguration as it portrays God's creation of his cosmos. The main connection, however, is the rest motif. For rest is the principal function of a temple, and a temple is always where deity finds rest. The cuneiform text does not necessarily mean that the Babylonians literally used a date palm tree to draw water up an incline. But whatever device they used to draw water upward, the date palm trees would best describe their idea to meet that need. Likewise, whatever the writer of Genesis 1 wanted to communicate, hammering a metal surface flat was the idea being expressed. God was building a temple. How were temples made in ancient times? The writer of Genesis 1 used language of fashioning, or better yet, building a temple to reveal that God's temple is the observable natural world. And it turns out that the observable natural world that God ordered, how the writer of Genesis described it, is compatible with modern physics.